Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. Sienna had seen better days, and honestly, better stations too. Outpost Bellamy squatted on the edge of the Helix sector like a rusty tin can someone had forgotten to throw away. It was the kind of place where the air recyclers wheezed asthmatically. The lighting flickered with a rhythm that suggested imminent electrical failure, and the locals looked at you like you might be their next meal or their next problem. Sometimes both. But Sienna wasn't picky. Picky people didn't last long in the cargo hauling business, and she'd been hauling freight across this corner of the galaxy for the better part of 6 years. Her ship, the Wandering Sparrow, was a testament to human stubbornness and the magical properties of duct tape. The hull had more patches than original plating. The engine made sounds that would make a mechanic weep, and the navigation system had a habit of suggesting routes through asteroid fields just for fun. But she flew, and that was what mattered. Sienna guided the Sparrow into Docking Bay 12 with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this dance 1,000 times. The docking clamps seized her ship with a metallic shriek that echoed through the hull, and she winced. That was new. Or maybe it wasn't. She'd stopped keeping track of which concerning noises were fresh, and which were vintage. The cargo manifest sat on her console, glowing softly in the dim cockpit. Medical supplies, mostly. Bandages, antiseptics, a few crates of synthetic plasma. The good stuff, the legitimate stuff. Then there was the other list, the one that didn't officially exist. Terran snack foods, chocolate bars, coffee packets, and something called Thunder Bars that were basically compressed sugar and caffeine shaped into brick form. Contraband, technically, but only because the Galactic Trade Council had decided that human food was too addictive for non-humans, which was ridiculous, but also kind of flattering. She grabbed her datapad and headed for the cargo bay, her boots clanging on the metal deck plates. The bay door hissed open, and she was immediately hit with the smell of Outpost Bellamy. Recycled air, industrial lubricant, and something vaguely organic that she'd learned not to think too hard about. Waiting for her at the bottom of the ramp was Homba. Homba was, well, Homba was a bureaucrat, which was somehow worse than being any specific species. The station administrator stood on 4 of its 6 limbs, the other 2 clutching a datapad that looked comically small in its webbed hands. Its skin was a mottled green-gray that glistened under the bay's harsh lighting, and its eyes, all 3 of them, tracked Sienna with the enthusiasm of someone watching mold grow. "Human Sienna," Homba said, its voice wet and gargling, like someone speaking through a mouthful of pudding. "You are late." "I'm exactly on time," Sienna replied, checking her chronometer. "See? Right down to the minute." "The minute that was 10 minutes ago, yes." Holmba's middle eye narrowed. "Your punctuality is as reliable as your vessel's structural integrity." "Hey, the Sparrow got me here, didn't she?" "Barely, I suspect." Homba tapped something on its datapad. "You have clearance to unload. Bay 6. Be efficient, be quiet, and stay out of the restricted sections." Sienna raised an eyebrow. "Which restricted sections? You've got, what, half the station cordoned off these days?" "All of them. Stay out of all of them." Homba's tone was flat, final. "We are experiencing a wildlife containment issue." "A what now?" "You are not authorized to inquire further. Unload your cargo. Collect your payment. Leave." And with that, Homba turned and squelched away, leaving Sienna standing at the bottom of her ramp with more questions than answers. Which was typical. Aliens loved their secrets almost as much as they loved their paperwork. Wildlife containment issue. What did that even mean? Sienna had been to Outpost Bellamy maybe a dozen times, and she'd never seen anything more exotic than a cage full of singing beetles from the Andromeda colonies. And those barely counted as wildlife. They were more like living musical instruments. She shrugged and headed back into the cargo bay. The crates were already loaded on the mag dolly, stacked high and strapped down tight. She double-checked the seals. Medical supplies were serious business, and she wasn't about to get fined because a box of bandages got contaminated, and then started pushing the dolly down the ramp. Bay 6 was 3 corridors over, which meant navigating through the station's guts. The halls were narrow and crowded, packed with aliens of every conceivable shape and size. A trio of insectoid traders clicked at each other in rapid-fire bursts of sound. A hulking, fur-covered species she didn't recognize lumbered past, nearly taking her head off with a swinging arm. Someone was cooking something that smelled like burning rubber mixed with cinnamon, and Sienna's stomach did a confused flip. She made it to Bay 6 without incident, which was something of a minor miracle. The bay was dimly lit, just a few overhead panels casting weak yellow light across the space. Rows of storage crates lined the walls, and the floor was stained with things she absolutely did not want to identify. Home, sweet home. Sienna parked the dolly and started unloading. Stacked the crates, scanned the labels, logged the inventory. It was mindless work, which was fine. Mindless work gave her brain time to wander, and right now it was wandering straight to the question of what she was going to eat when she got back to the ship. Probably another ration bar. Maybe she'd splurge and heat it up this time. That was when she heard it. A sound, soft, almost musical. A chittering, like claws on metal, but lighter, faster. Sienna froze, crate half lifted. She turned her head slowly, scanning the shadows between the storage containers. Nothing moved. The chittering stopped. "Hello?" Her voice echoed, slightly in the empty bay. "Holmba, if this is some kind of hazing ritual for human haulers, I swear I will file a complaint so long it'll crash your datapad." Silence. She shook her head and went back to unloading. Probably just station vermin. Every outpost had them. Rats or the alien equivalent. Nothing to worry about. The chittering started again, closer this time. Sienna set the crate down and pulled the small flashlight from her belt. She clicked it on and swept the beam across the bay. Shadows danced and retreated. The beam caught something, a flash of movement, quick and low to the ground. "All right, buddy," she muttered. "I don't want trouble. You don't want trouble. Let's just keep it that way." The thing moved again, and this time she saw it clearly. Small. Maybe the size of a house cat, but longer, more serpentine. It was covered in feathers. Iridescent feathers that shimmered blue and green and gold in the flashlight beam. 6 eyes, arranged in 2 rows, reflected the light back at her like tiny jewels. And its mouth, well, its mouth was open, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth that looked far too big for its head. "Oh," Sienna said softly, "that's not a rat." The creature chirped. It was an oddly pleasant sound, high-pitched and melodic, completely at odds with the teeth situation. Then it darted forward, moving faster than Sienna could track. She yelped and stumbled backward, but the creature wasn't going for her legs. It went up. Tiny claws dug into her pants, her jacket, her shoulder. And then, with a final triumphant chirp, it grabbed her braid, the long, dark braid she'd woven that morning and immediately regretted because it was too hot on the ship, and yanked. "Ow! Hey!" Sienna twisted, trying to reach behind her head, but the creature was already climbing. It scrambled up her braid like it was a rope, claws pricking her scalp, and then it was on top of her head, perched like some kind of deranged parrot. It chirped again, louder this time, and wrapped its tail around her neck. Not tight enough to choke, but definitely tight enough to make a point. Sienna stood very, very still. "Okay," she said, her voice carefully calm. "Okay, you're on my head. That's fine. That's totally fine. Do you want to, maybe, not be on my head?" The creature purred. It was the kind of sound a chainsaw might make if it was trying to be soothing. Then it started grooming her hair, its tiny claws tugging at the strands with surprising gentleness. "This is fine," Sienna said to the empty bay. "This is a completely normal day in the life of Sienna the cargo hauler. Just standing here with a mystery animal on my head. Nothing weird about this at all." That was when she heard the voice. "Do not move, human." The voice boomed through the bay like the wrath of an angry god, amplified by speakers she couldn't see. Sienna froze, which wasn't hard, because she was already frozen. "I am not moving," she shouted back. "I am being extremely stationary, right now." The bay doors hissed open, and a figure stepped through. Tall. That was Sienna's first thought. Very, very tall. The alien stood at least 8 feet high, with a body that looked like someone had taken a praying mantis and stretched it through a nightmare filter. Its limbs were long and thin, jointed in too many places, and its head was triangular, dominated by huge, multifaceted eyes that glittered like cut glass. It wore a sash of deep purple across its thorax, marked with symbols that Sienna recognized as diplomatic insignia. The alien looked at her. Then it looked at the creature on her head. Then it made a sound that might have been a groan, if groans could convey existential despair. "Oh no," the alien said, its voice now coming from a translator device clipped to its sash. "Oh no, 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 this is bad. This is very bad." "I'm glad we agree," Sienna said, still not moving. "Want to tell me what's on my head?" The alien took a step forward, its movements slow and deliberate, like it was approaching a live explosive. "That, human, is a shrike hatchling, one of the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. And judging by the way it is currently nesting in your hair, it has imprinted on you." Sienna blinked. "Imprinted." "Yes, like a baby bird. If the baby bird could disembowel a combat mech, then yes, exactly like that." The creature on Sienna's head chirped happily and tugged her hair again. "So," Sienna said slowly, "what you're saying is, I shouldn't try to shake it off. If you value your continued existence in a non-shredded state, then no, you should absolutely not do that." "Great, fantastic. Love that for me." Sienna took a careful breath. "I don't suppose you have a plan?" The alien's eyes shimmered, which might have been the equivalent of a grimace. "I am Ambassador Falnir, and I am here to ensure that you and the hatchling both survive the next 6 hours. After that," he paused, "after that, we pray to whatever deities you humans believe in." "I'm not loving the sound of this," Sienna said. "You are not meant to," Falnir replied. "Now please, follow me. Slowly. Very, very slowly. And whatever you do not let the hatchling fall. Its mother is on her way, and she will not be pleased if her offspring is harmed." "Her mother?" "Yes, matriarch Hana. She is approximately the size of a small shuttle and has a documented temper." "Of course she does." Sienna took a slow, careful step forward. The creature on her head shifted its weight, claws digging in slightly, and she bit back a wince. Falnir gestured for her to follow, his movements sharp with barely controlled panic. As they left the bay, Sienna caught sight of Holmba watching from a doorway, all 3 eyes wide with what might have been amusement or horror. probably both. Wildlife containment issue, Sienna muttered. You could have been more specific, you slimy bureaucrat. The creature chirped, apparently in agreement, and Sienna sighed. It was going to be a long day. Falnir led Sienna through a maze of corridors that seemed specifically designed to confuse anyone with less than 4 legs and a navigation degree. The creature, the shrike hatchling, apparently, remained perched on her head like the world's most dangerous hat, occasionally chirping or tugging at her braid with what Sienna was choosing to interpret as affection rather than hunger. They arrived at what looked like a storage room that had been hastily converted into a crisis center. Screens lined one wall, displaying various camera feeds of the station. A table in the center was covered in datapads, all of them blinking with urgent messages that nobody seemed to be reading. "Sit," Falnir said, gesturing to a chair. "Slowly." Sienna sat. The hatchling adjusted its position, tail still wrapped around her neck like a very pointy scarf. "All right," she said, keeping her voice level. "Let's start with the basics. What exactly is a shrike, and why is one currently using my head as a nest?" Falnir's mandibles clicked together in what might have been anxiety. Shrikes are apex predators from the outer bands. They are intelligent, fiercely territorial, and capable of taking down prey many times their size. An adult shrike can tear through reinforced hull plating. They hunt in packs, coordinate attacks with military precision, and have been known to hold grudges for decades. Wonderful. And this one picked me because shrike hatchlings imprint on their first caregiver. Usually this is their mother, but in cases where they are separated, they will bond with whoever they encounter first. You, human Sienna, are now this hatchling's chosen guardian. The hatchling chirped and nuzzled against Sienna's ear, which would have been adorable if not for the whole apex predator thing. "Can't we just unimprint it?" Sienna asked hopefully. "No, the bond is absolute. If you reject it, the hatchling will die. If the hatchling dies, matriarch Ilshana will raise this station to its foundation, and everyone in it will join her offspring in death. So, no pressure. Immense pressure, actually." Sienna closed her eyes and took a long breath. When she opened them again, Falnir was staring at her with those huge compound eyes, and she got the distinct impression he was waiting for her to panic. Which was fair. She kind of wanted to panic. But panicking had never solved anything, and she'd been in tight spots before. Not this tight, admittedly, but close enough. "How long until the matriarch arrives?" she asked. 6 hours, approximately. "And what do I need to do to keep Junior here alive and happy until then?" Falnir's posture shifted slightly, his panic giving way to something that might have been relief. "You are taking this well." "I'm having a complete breakdown on the inside, but my outside is very professional." Sienna reached up slowly, testing whether she could touch the hatchling without losing a finger. It leaned into her, hand purring that chainsaw velvet sound. "So, care instructions?" Shrikes require constant stimulation. They are highly intelligent and become destructive when bored. They also need protein, substantial amounts of protein, and they must feel safe, secure, and trusted. "I've got jerky in my ship. Will that work?" "It should suffice temporarily." "Great. Anything else?" Falnir hesitated. "Do not let it out of your sight. Do not allow anyone to threaten it. And do not, under any circumstances, attempt to remove it from your person. The hatchling has chosen you. It will follow you, protect you, and, assuming you survive the matriarch's judgment, bond with you for life." "For life?" "Yes. How long do shrikes live?" Approximately 200 standard years. Sienna stared at him. Then she started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh, exactly, more the kind of laugh that happened when the universe decided to drop an absurd situation into your lap, and all you could do was appreciate the cosmic joke of it all. The hatchling chirped, apparently pleased by the sound, and started grooming her hair again. "Okay," Sienna said, still grinning despite herself. "Okay, 200 years, sure, why not? I didn't have any long-term plans anyway." She looked at Falnir. "Does it have a name?" "Shrike hatchlings are not named until they complete their first hunt." "Well, I'm not calling it, 'Hey you' for 6 hours." Sienna tilted her head, feeling the weight of the creature shift. "You keep trying to snip at everything with those teeth, don't you?" She felt the hatchling bite gently at her ear, playful rather than aggressive. "All right, Snippet. That's your name. You're Snippet now." Snippet chirped enthusiastically and flared their feathers. The iridescent plumage caught the light, shimmering like oil on water. "Snippet," Falnir repeated, his translator struggling with the casual human nickname. "You have named a shrike hatchling. Snippet. You got a problem with that? I suspect the matriarch might. I'll deal with that when she gets here. Right now, I need food, a plan, and maybe a stiff drink." Falnir's mandibles clicked again. "The station bar is on level 3, but I would not recommend—" He was cut off by the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed along the ceiling, and a mechanical voice echoed through the speakers. "Security alert. Unauthorized boarding. Deck 5. All personnel take defensive positions." Sienna was on her feet instantly, one hand reaching up to steady Snippet, who had gone rigid on her head. "What now?" Falnir was already at the screens, his long fingers flying over the controls. The camera feeds flickered, and then one of them showed the docking bay. A ship, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons, had forced its way through the bay doors. Figures in combat armor were pouring out, armed and moving with military precision. "Pirates," Falnir said, his voice flat. "The Blackfin Reavers. They must have been tracking the diplomatic convoy." "Let me guess," Sienna said, already knowing the answer. "They're here for Snippet." "Yes, shrike hatchlings are worth millions on the black market. Perhaps billions." Snippet hissed, a sound like steam escaping from a broken pipe, and Sienna felt the tiny claws dig harder into her scalp. The hatchling was afraid and angry, and so, suddenly, was she. "Well," Sienna said, her voice cold and steady, "they can't have him." Falnir turned to look at her, his compound eyes reflecting the red alarm lights. "Human Sienna, you are a cargo hauler. You are not equipped for combat." "No," Sienna agreed, "but I'm equipped for improvisation, and I'm really, really good at not dying." She cracked her knuckles and headed for the door. "Come on, Ambassador. Let's go meet our guests." The thing about cargo haulers, Sienna had learned over the years, was that they developed a very specific skill set. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't involve fancy weapons or combat training or whatever it was that military types did in their spare time, but it did involve knowing how to move heavy objects with minimal resources, how to navigate tight spaces, and how to think 3 steps ahead when everything was going wrong, which right now was exactly what was happening. Sienna moved through the corridors with Falnir close behind, his long legs letting him keep pace despite his obvious terror. Snippet remained perched on her head, feathers flat against his body, eyes scanning their surroundings with an intensity that suggested he understood the danger perfectly well. "Where are they?" Sienna whispered. Falnir checked his datapad. "Deck 5, moving toward the central hub." They are bypassing security checkpoints. I estimate they will reach this level in 8 minutes. Then we have 8 minutes to make their lives difficult. Sienna spotted a maintenance panel and pried it open. Inside was exactly what she hoped for. A junction box controlling the environmental systems. You know anything about station infrastructure? I am a diplomat, not an engineer. That's a no, then. Sienna grabbed a handful of wires and started pulling. Lucky for you, I've broken enough systems to know how they work. Gravity plating runs on these conduits. Lighting is tied into the same grid. And if I do this right... She twisted 2 wires together and was rewarded with a shower of sparks. We can make them very uncomfortable. The lights in the corridor flickered and died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a dim red glow. "What did you do?" Falnir asked, his voice pitched higher than usual. Made it harder for them to see where they're going. "Come on." They moved toward the cargo bay, where Sienna had left her dolly and supplies. Her mind was already working through the possibilities. The pirates wanted Snippet. They'd come prepared for resistance, which meant armor, weapons, probably some kind of scanning equipment to track the hatchling. But they were expecting station security, maybe some scared civilians. They weren't expecting a human with a grudge and access to heavy machinery. The cargo bay was dark when they arrived, lit only by the red emergency strips along the floor. Sienna's dolly sat where she'd left it, surrounded by crates of medical supplies. She grabbed the cargo hook from her belt, a nasty piece of equipment with a curved blade designed for prying open stuck containers, and tested its weight. "This is your plan?" Falnir asked, staring at the hook. "A melee weapon against armed mercenaries?" "This is step 1 of my plan. Step 2 involves being creative." Sienna pointed at the crates. "Help me move these. We're making a maze." "A maze?" "They want Snippet. They're going to come through that door any minute now. And when they do, I want them confused, slowed down, and really annoyed." Falnir hesitated for only a moment before his long arms started grabbing crates. Together, they built a hasty barricade, stacking containers in a pattern that created narrow corridors and blind corners. Sienna knew it wouldn't stop the pirates, but it didn't need to. It just needed to give her an advantage. Snippet chirped softly, and Sienna felt the tiny claws knead against her scalp. "I know, buddy. I know. Just hang on." The bay doors hissed open. Sienna ducked behind a crate, pulling Falnir down beside her. Through the gaps in their makeshift maze, she could see figures entering the bay. 6 of them, all in black armor, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Leading them was a reptilian alien with scarred green scales and cold yellow eyes that swept the room with professional efficiency. "Spread out," the reptilian said, his voice a low hiss. "Find the hatchling. Keep it alive. Everything else is expendable." Woln had to be. He moved like someone who'd done this before, confident and controlled. The pirates fanned out, moving through the maze of crates. Sienna held her breath, watching as one of them passed within feet of their hiding spot. Snippet had gone completely silent, his body tense, and Sienna realized the hatchling was hunting. Not fleeing. Hunting. "On 3, she whispered to Falnir. "You go left. Make noise. I go right. Make pain." "This is madness." "Yeah, probably. 3. Sienna exploded from cover, swinging the cargo hook in a wide arc. The nearest pirate turned just in time to catch the blade across his helmet, the impact ringing like a bell. He stumbled backward, and Sienna was already moving, using her momentum to slam into the next pirate and send him crashing into a stack of crates. Falnir, to his credit, did exactly what she'd asked. He ran left, knocking over containers and creating a cascade of noise that drew two more pirates away from Sienna's position. Snippet launched himself from Sienna's head. The hatchling moved like liquid death, his small body a blur of feathers and claws. He hit the closest pirate in the face, latching onto the helmet and clawing at the visor with savage precision. The pirate screamed, staggering backward, and Snippet rode him down, hissing and tearing. "Get it off me! Get it off!" Sienna didn't wait. She grabbed a crate, one of the heavier ones, full of synthetic plasma containers, and shoved it hard. The crate tipped, crashed, and exploded in a spray of medical supplies that turned the floor into a slippery mess. Two pirates went down immediately, their armored boots finding no purchase on the slick surface. Blaster fire lit up the bay. Sienna dropped, rolled, came up behind another crate. The smell of ozone and burned metal filled the air. "Sienna!" Falnir's voice was panicked. "I am not built for this." "Neither am I. Just keep moving." Wallen's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough! Stun rounds! I want that human alive." Oh, that was not good. Sienna grabbed her datapad from her pocket and frantically pulled up the bay's control systems. Every cargo bay had them: environmental controls, maglocks, bulkhead doors. She found what she was looking for and triggered it. The cargo bay's emergency bulkhead slammed down, cutting the room in half. 3 of the pirates were on Sienna's side. 3, including Wallen, were trapped on the other side. The ones on her side looked at each other, then at the bulkhead, then at Sienna. "Hi," Sienna said, still crouched behind her crate. "Bad news, guys. You're stuck with me." One of them raised his weapon. Snippet hit him from above, dropping from a ceiling conduit like a feathered missile. The pirate went down hard, and Snippet was already moving, leaping to the next target with terrifying speed. Sienna grabbed a canister from the broken crates, antiseptic spray, highly flammable, and threw it at the nearest pirate. It bounced off his chest plate, and he looked down at it in confusion. "Falnir!" Sienna shouted. "Shoot it!" "I do not have a weapon." "Then throw something." Falnir grabbed a metal tool from a supply rack and hurled it with surprising accuracy. It hit the canister, which ruptured and sprayed its contents across the pirate's armor. Sienna followed up with a cargo flare, designed to mark emergency evacuations, and tossed it at his feet. The flare ignited the antiseptic spray. The pirate became a screaming, running torch, and his companions scattered to avoid him. On the other side of the bulkhead, Wallen was roaring orders and pounding on the door. Sienna could hear the whine of cutting torches starting up. She had maybe 2 minutes before they burned through. Snippet returned to her, landing on her shoulder and chittering urgently. He was breathing hard, his feathers ruffled, but he looked pleased, proud. It was hard to tell with 6 eyes, but Sienna got the impression he was having the time of his life. "You," she said, "are a menace." Snippet chirped and licked her cheek with a tongue that felt like sandpaper. The remaining 2 pirates on Sienna's side had regrouped, and they weren't taking chances anymore. They moved together, covering each other, weapons trained on her position. Professional? Experienced? Not good. Sienna glanced at Falnir, who was pressed against a crate, his compound eyes wide with fear. Then she looked at Snippet, who was coiled on her shoulder like a tiny dragon ready to strike. "All right," she muttered. "No more clever tricks. Time to improvise." She stood up, hands raised, cargo hook dangling from one hand. "You want the hatchling? Come get him." The pirates advanced. Snippet hissed, and then the bay shuddered. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't weapon fire. It was something else, something deeper. The kind of vibration that came from a very large ship, docking very, very hard. The bulkhead on the far side of the bay, not the one Sienna had closed, but the main exterior door, began to buckle. Metal shrieked. The pirates froze, looking at each other in confusion. "What is that?" one of them asked. Sienna felt Snippet go rigid on her shoulder. The hatchling's feathers flared out, and he made a sound she hadn't heard before. A high-pitched trill that echoed through the bay like a call for help. Or a greeting. The bulkhead tore open. Not cut, not blown. Torn, the reinforced metal peeling away like paper. And through the gap came something massive. Sienna had seen big creatures before. She'd seen cargo ships that could carry cities, station habitats that housed millions. But this was different. This was alive, and it was angry. The matriarch filled the doorway. She was easily the size of a shuttle, covered in feathers that shifted between black and deep blue, with wings that scraped the ceiling and claws that dug furrows in the deck plating. Her eyes, 24 of them, arranged in 4 rows along her wedge-shaped head, focused on the scene before her with terrible clarity. She saw the pirates. She saw Falnir. She saw Sienna, standing in the middle of the chaos with her hands raised and a cargo hook in one hand. And she saw Snippet, perched on Sienna's shoulder, chirping excitedly at the sight of his mother. The matriarch's head tilted. Her gaze locked onto Sienna, and for a moment, the human cargo hauler was absolutely certain she was about to die. Then Snippet launched himself from Sienna's shoulder, gliding through the air on tiny wings, and landed on his mother's snout. He chirped again, nuzzling against her scales, and began what could only be described as enthusiastic babbling. The matriarch listened. Her eyes never left Sienna. Behind her, Sienna heard Voln and his remaining pirates finally burning through the bulkhead. She heard footsteps, weapons charging. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. The matriarch's attention was absolute, and breaking eye contact felt like it would be the last mistake she ever made. Snippet finished his story, whatever it was, and the matriarch made a sound like distant thunder. Then, slowly, deliberately, she lowered her massive head and bowed. Sienna blinked. What?" "She recognizes you as packmate," Falnir said, his voice trembling with awe. "She is thanking you for protecting her offspring." "Oh, you're welcome?" The matriarch raised her head and turned to face the pirates, who were now pouring through the cut bulkhead. Voln took one look at the creature filling the bay and went very, very pale. "Run," he said. The matriarch pounced. What happened next was something Sienna would later describe as educational and deeply terrifying, and probably best left unmentioned in polite company. The matriarch moved through the pirates like a force of nature. Not chaotic, not frenzied, surgical, precise. She knew exactly where each one was, exactly how much force to apply, and exactly how to make the point that her offspring was not, under any circumstances, for sale. Sienna didn't watch, partly because she was pretty sure witnessing it would give her nightmares, and partly because Snippet had returned to her shoulder and was nuzzling against her neck in a way that suggested he'd prefer if she didn't watch his mother work either. The sound stopped after maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. Time got weird when apex predators were involved. When Sienna finally looked up, the bay was empty, except for her, Falnir, Snippet, and the matriarch. There was no sign of the pirates. None at all. Which was probably for the best. The matriarch turned back to face Sienna, her massive head tilting as she studied the human. A sound emanated from her throat, deep, resonant, like the lowest note of an organ mixed with distant, rolling thunder. A translator device on her chest flickered to life, projecting a female voice that somehow matched the creature's presence perfectly. "You are Sienna," the matriarch said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." Sienna had no idea if ma'am was the correct honorific for a starship-sized predator, but it seemed safer than alternatives. "My offspring has told me what transpired. You protected him, defended him, gave him a name." The matriarch's eyes narrowed slightly, all 24 of them focusing with unnerving intensity. "Snippet." Yeah, about that. If you don't like it, I can—" "It is appropriate." He attempts to cut everything with his teeth. "I have noticed this tendency." Something that might have been amusement rippled through the matriarch's tone. "You have bonded with him." "I guess so. I mean, he climbed on my head and wouldn't leave, so it wasn't exactly voluntary at first, but—" Sienna stopped herself before she could ramble further. "Yes, we bonded." The matriarch was quiet for a long moment. Snippet chirped softly, and his mother's gaze shifted to him briefly before returning to Sienna. "Among my kind," the matriarch said, "bonding is sacred. When a hatchling chooses a guardian, it is for life. Not their life, but yours. My offspring will outlive you by more than a century. He will watch you grow old, weaken, die, and he will mourn." Sienna felt something tighten in her chest. She hadn't thought about that. Hadn't had time to think about much of anything, really, except survival. "I understand," she said quietly. "Do you? Do you comprehend what it means to accept this bond?" The matriarch lowered her head until she was eye-level with Sienna. "You will be packmate. You will be honored among my clan. You will be protected, welcomed, given status that few outsiders ever achieve. But you will also be responsible. For him, for his growth, his safety, his education. You will be his guardian until you can no longer fulfill that role. And even then, he will remember you." Sienna looked at Snippet, who was watching her with those 6 bright eyes, his head tilted in a way that made him look oddly vulnerable despite the teeth. He chirped once, softly, and she felt his tail tighten around her arm. She thought about her life. The cargo runs, the empty ship, the years of drifting from station to station with nothing permanent, nothing that really mattered. She'd told herself she liked it that way. No attachments, no complications, just her and the void and the endless highway between stars. But Snippet felt warm against her shoulder. He felt like something real. "Yeah," Sienna said, meeting the matriarch's gaze without flinching. "I accept. I'll take care of him. I promise." The matriarch studied her for another long moment, and then, impossibly, she smiled. At least, Sienna thought it was a smile. It involved a lot of teeth. "Then you are packmate," the matriarch declared. "You are recognized. You are clan." She straightened, her wings spreading slightly. "But I must know. Will you give him up? Will you return to your life and leave him with me, where he will be safe with his own kind?" Sienna blinked. "Wait, that's an option?" "Of course. The bond is sacred, but I will not force you to upend your existence for a hatchling's whim. You may choose." Snippet made a small sound, almost like a whimper, and pressed closer to Sienna's neck. She felt his heartbeat, fast, anxious, and something in her chest cracked wide open. "No," Sienna said firmly. "He's mine now. I'm keeping him. Even though it will complicate your life immeasurably. Especially because of that." Sienna grinned despite herself. "I was getting bored with simple anyway." Snippet chirped joyfully and began grooming her hair again, and the matriarch made that thunder purr sound that might have been approval. "There is one condition," the matriarch said. "You will allow him to return to me for training. Once per cycle, you will bring him home so that he may learn the ways of his kind. He must know both worlds, yours and mine. Deal, as long as I get to keep hauling cargo. I've got a living to make. Of course, I would not ask you to abandon your purpose. The matriarch's eyes glittered with something that might have been respect. Humans, always so stubborn, so adaptable. This is why my offspring chose well. Falnir, who had been silent through the entire exchange, finally found his voice. Matriarch Ilshana, if I may, this is unprecedented. A human, bonded to a shrike hatchling? The Galactic Council will need to be informed. There will be paperwork, treaties, diplomatic considerations. Then consider them, the matriarch said dismissively. I care nothing for your counsels and papers. My offspring is safe. His guardian is worthy. That is all that matters. She turned back to Sienna. You will be contacted. Resources will be provided. If you have need of anything, protection, supplies, counsel, you have only to ask. You are packmate now. That means something. Thank you, Sienna said, and meant it. The matriarch leaned down one final time, her massive head close enough that Sienna could feel the heat radiating from her scales. Guard him well, small human, and know that if harm comes to him through negligence or cruelty, I will find you. Distance means nothing to a mother's vengeance. Understood, completely. Extremely understood. Satisfied, the matriarch straightened. She called to Snippet, a series of clicks and trills that the hatchling responded to immediately, chirping back in what sounded like a promise. Then she turned and launched herself through the torn bulkhead, her wings catching air as she disappeared into the void beyond. The bay fell silent. Sienna let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well, that happened. Falnir was staring at her with all the intensity of someone witnessing a natural disaster and a miracle simultaneously. You do realize what you have just agreed to? A lifetime of weirdness and a small predator who thinks my hair is a toy? You have been inducted into a shrike clan. There are diplomats who have spent decades attempting to achieve even basic communication with them. And you have been granted packmate status after knowing the hatchling for less than a day. Sienna shrugged. What can I say? I'm personable. Snippet chirped in agreement and bit her ear affectionately. You are insane, Falnir said, but there was admiration in his voice. Probably. But I'm also alive, so I'll take it. Sienna looked around the destroyed cargo bay, at the torn bulkheads and scattered supplies. I should probably file an incident report. I will handle the paperwork, Falnir said wearily. You should return to your vessel and adjust to your new circumstances. Yeah, good call. Sienna made her way back through the station, Snippet perched happily on her shoulder. Aliens stared as she passed. Word had clearly spread. But nobody tried to stop her. Nobody even spoke to her. They just watched, wide-eyed, as the human and her apex predator walked by like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. The wandering sparrow was exactly as she'd left it, battered, beloved, and barely functional. Sienna climbed aboard, Snippet exploring the cockpit with enthusiastic curiosity, poking his nose into every corner and chirping at the blinking console lights. Welcome home, buddy, Sienna said, settling into her pilot's chair. Snippet immediately claimed the co-pilot seat, circling 3 times before curling up in a ball of iridescent feathers. She pulled up her message queue and found it flooded. Contract offers. Lots of them. Apparently, having a shrike guardian made you very popular in certain circles. Escort jobs, high-risk deliveries, protection details, all offering rates that made her old cargo runs look like charity work. Sienna scrolled through them, grinning. "Looks like we're moving up in the world, Snippet." Snippet opened one eye, chirped sleepily, and went back to napping. "Yeah," Sienna said, punching in coordinates for their next destination. "You and me, we're gonna do just fine." The wandering sparrow launched from Outpost Bellamy, leaving the station behind in a streak of light. Ahead lay the infinite expanse of space, full of possibilities and dangers and adventures waiting to be claimed. And somewhere in the cargo bay, Snippet had already found Sienna's stash of thunder bars and was systematically shredding the packaging. Sienna heard the noise and laughed. "On second thought," she called back, "we're gonna be a disaster, but a really entertaining one." Snippet chirped in wholehearted agreement, and the sparrow flew on.